legislative session concluded at 11:45 a.m. on Wednesday. So here's kind of a wrap on the session, as well as a kudos to all of our members for the advocacy that they engaged upon throughout the legislative session. And I want to just tell you that advocacy, whether you participated in a general advocacy request or you worked closely with Phil on some of our targeted advocacy, really made a difference. Sometimes I think you don't realize how much of a difference it made, but I'm going to give you two concrete examples where your help was invaluable in stopping bad legislation and passing good legislation. First, let's talk about vouchers. So early in the session, when we knew vouchers was going to be an issue, Phil and I worked to put together a list of targeted legislators who we felt we could convince that they should tell their leadership that they were not going to support a voucher bill. And Phil worked with boards in all of those districts to set up Zoom meetings with those legislators so board members could talk directly with them about why this was not the right approach. And at the end of the day, we held so many of those Zoom meetings, we created a groundswell of opposition among the House Republican caucus, thanks to your advocacy efforts, and the voucher bill was never brought forward in the House. On the positive side, one of the things that we've talked about for the last several years is providing more funding for English language learners who need more intensive assistance and kind of reshifting the focus of that with respect to those weightings. The House has always had that as a priority and has easily passed the bill, but the Senate has never taken action on it because they perceived it as being only for the urban districts. So Phil and I sat down and we took a look at the districts that have high percentages of ELL students. And you know what we found? The majority of those were in rural Senate Republican districts. So we got to work with those boards and you engaged with us to engage legislators. And we were able to convince Senate Republicans to bring up the ELL bill, and it was passed and signed into law. So those are just two concrete examples of when we call on you for your advocacy, you've actually made a difference in the outcome. And so I just, first of all, give yourself a pat on the back. Secondly, continue those efforts. So let's talk about what kind of happened in the last few days of the legislative session. Obviously, things at times moved very quickly and at times were very slow. A lot of standing around waiting for decisions to be made. I know that there were a lot of frustrations over this legislative session. We certainly share those frustrations, but some good things also came out of it. So in those last couple of days, we did end up stopping a provision in an election bill that was going to require you to mail notice to every registered voter in your district regarding an upcoming public measure or election on a bond or your PEPL or your revenue purpose statement. We were able to successfully strip that from that election bill. Another thing that happened in the last 3 days of the legislative session is work on the education appropriations bill or the ed budget bill, which also included a large number of policy bills. And while we are frustrated with the way in which the accreditation process language was added to that bill, we were successful in making some changes to make it less onerous and to prevent it from causing as many problems as it did when it originally passed the House. The other thing is there was a last minute item that came up in one of the budget bills that was going to essentially require you as districts to purchase what they call a panic button app from one company to use for your school security purposes. We were really concerned about this because A, there'd been no discussion, and B, it was outside the scope of the work we'd been doing with the Department of Public Safety. We were successful in getting that language stripped so that we aren't creating two school security systems. So those are just some examples of things that went on that we engaged upon. Obviously, the issue with prohibiting school districts from requiring masks for attendance is concerning, not just from the health aspect, but also because it takes away local decision making. We did have some conversation and they did mitigate some of our concerns in that bill, which was signed into law early Thursday morning. But that is a sign that legislators oftentimes decide they don't like the actions of school boards, so they, in essence, decide to become the state school board and make those decisions for you. Taking a look at the broader view of the session, I'm not going to try to paint a rosy picture about some of the bad things that happened, because there certainly were some things that we are not happy about and that we're very frustrated about. But when I take a look at our tally, we had school boards and K through 12 education had a pretty decent year. We got a number of things accomplished, including some things that have been a priority. I'm just going to hit very quickly on those. One of the concerns we've heard from our folks is about the enrollment issue that might occur with preschool. We were successful not only in working with the legislature to create a framework to deliver some funds for districts that see a sizable increase in their preschool enrollment in the next school year. We worked with the governor's office to ensure that she will allocate federal funds to districts for that program rather than using state dollars. That was kind of an under the radar win that we didn't talk a lot about, but I think it's going to make a real difference for districts in the upcoming school year. We also passed a bill that we've been working on for 3 years that had a number of flexibility provisions for both AEAs and school districts, reducing some of the reporting requirements, providing more flexibility in some of your decision making, eliminating some of the public notice requirements. All of these things are going, well, maybe small individually, taken as a whole, show that we were able to get the legislature to recognize that we need to give boards more freedom. At the same time, they're taking it away to make some of their own decisions. And then lastly, I want to talk a little bit about mental health, because mental health has always been one of our top topics coming from our members. We need more mental health supports in schools. And while it's tough because it's such a complex and large problem, we did make some inroads this year. 3 things happened that I think are really important. Number one, the legislature approved a bill that will require insurance companies to pay the same level of reimbursement for behavioral health delivered via telehealth as they do in person. This really fits in nicely with our school-based telehealth bill that was signed into law last year. Number 2, we know that some districts have had problems hiring some mental health professionals and applied behavioral analysts, people who work with kids with autism, because the BOEE did not recognize them. We were able to pass into law a bill that requires the BOEE to develop a statement of professional recognition for those mental health professionals, which will make it easier for districts to hire them to work with their students. And the last thing is that we expanded the number of positions eligible for operational sharing incentives to include any mental health professional who has that statement of professional recognition. This creates not only the financial incentive for you to work with your AEA or another school district to expand the number of mental health professionals that are available, but it also gives you the opportunity to maybe work with a community mental health provider and hire with respect to them, because you're allowed to share positions with those entities as well. So when those 3 things are taken together, we think that this is a really good step toward helping schools address what they have seen increasing in terms of mental health issues and concerns with their students. So I'm not going to talk about the bad things. We know what they are, and they are frustrating, and we will continue to push back on any proposals that are not benefiting K through 12 education. But I want you to take a look at kind of a holistic approach to this session and know that for all the frustrating things happened, a lot of good things did as well. You'll be able to get all of the updates in board briefs this week by clicking on the bill summary link. And next week, we will be unveiling our new legislative summary, which will kind of encapsulate everything that happened this session. That will be on our website rather than a paper copy, and we can continue to update that as the governor takes action. So in closing, I just want to thank you once again for all of that advocacy. Honestly, without that, a lot of the things that occurred would not have occurred. We wouldn't have stopped vouchers. We wouldn't have passed ELL. We wouldn't have let legislators know we needed resources to help with mental health. That was all coming from folks on the ground, from you folks, and really appreciate it and encourage you to keep those interactions with your legislators going throughout the interim.